Another edition of Perspectives, third-party talk show with Bill Redpath of the Libertarian Party, and I am David Rich of the Green Party. Decided to put the show together so that people have an opportunity to understand where the third parties are coming from. Now, saying that, admittedly, neither of us represent the totality or the sum in any sort of way, shape, or form of the rest of our respective parties, but we are speaking from what we best understand in our own personal estimation, a perspective from that gallery of thought, if you will. I like that, actually. Makes it sound like it's art. Okay, cool. So, Bill, what's happening?
Well, I'm hanging in there is what I'm doing. I owe you an apology, by the way. I framed you last week saying that you were going to make me watch the GOP debate. Actually, I came up with the idea for what we're going to talk about tonight, but I framed you for it. Although I did worry, though. I was concerned I was going to be doing, after watching the Republican Party presidential debate, I was concerned I'd be doing this show from a hospital bed. But that I survived it okay. It was not as bad an experience as what I thought it was going to be. I mean, it was no walk in the park, but it wasn't so bad. So, did you watch it, David?
So, you want to hear an irony?
Okay.
I got about 7 minutes in, I couldn't handle it, and I turned it off.
Oh, really?
Like I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Oh my God!
So as I swore to watch it, and you said you weren't going to the table.
Well, then I can just say I can say anything. I can make anything up about the debate.
No, I've heard plenty about it in the last week.
I've heard Ronald Reagan made a guest appearance. You don't know that's not so, huh?
I don't know it, but I can. I'm sure that I can see them like with their little, cultish cabals, like conjuring his spirit.
Yeah.
But I've heard of so much commentary on it and seen enough snippets.
What was it that drove you away?
It was the Vivek, I can't remember his last name, guy.
Oh yeah, he gets my goat too, believe me.
Oh, and this is very
Ramaswamy, right?
Yeah.
Or Rasa, whatever.
And he just started going off on like nonsense, and specifically, this obviously comes directly from a Green Party perspective. Like, he's just like, climate change is a hoax. Let's bring oil and blah blah blah. I'm done. You're that's ridiculous.
Well, I agree with some of that, but first of all, I just think, I mean, he's frankly, I find his persona repulsive. I mean,
he's a very just condescending
performance artist, right. But he slandered the other candidates up there, saying they were all bought and paid for. I'm the only person here tonight who's not bought and paid for. And that is just ridiculous to claim that everybody up there is just a puppet of of rich donors. I thought his performance was absolutely reprehensible.
Yeah, no, I've seen interviews with him outside of that, and he's extremely, just his demeanor is off-putting. I mean,
right? Oh, for sure.
But I mean, including what he says, the substance and content of what he says, but like his whole demeanor is just, he's arrogant. He's just he's a know-it-all.
Right.
Without any real data to back up probably half what he says. So well then, since you have the more, as they say in philosophy, epistemological privilege,
go boy,
you actually witnessed this whole thing. Why don't you give us a summary of what you think happened?
Well, what to do, where to start, as they say. Well, of course, did you see Richmond, north of Richmond? Did you see that song at the beginning?
You didn't? The country song?
Yeah, that they start at the beginning. They played a little bit, and they actually, I'm surprised they included the part with a naughty word. Your dollar ain't blank, and there was an obscenity there. And
the word ain't, is that the obscenity? Because it's not actually a word.
No, that wasn't it was a legit word that. I'm kidding. Yeah, and so. Legit word you can't say on TV. Or an illegitimate word, okay? So in any event, so they played a snippet of that and then asked the participants, why do people feel this way? Why do people feel so alienated? Hey, have you heard the song? Have you heard the song, by the way?
No, but again, I've heard a little bit of it, and I've heard a lot of commentary on it. It's like a blue collar kind of like anthem of like, hey, I'm busting my butt and I'm getting nothing from it.
Right. And I got to tell you, though, you got to go to Reason. If you haven't seen it already, everybody, go to reason.com and see the spoof. I believe his name is Remy. I believe there's a guy who does funny videos, and he uses the same music but inserts new lyrics from the perspective of federal workers. Okay. And it is pretty funny. It's
Okay.
really, this spoof video is really well done. He even has the microphone. Okay, he even has the same microphone, sort of in the same place that Oliver Anthony has. It's well done. So in any event, so they did that, and something that Nikki Haley said. Anyway, they talked about Biden. Of course, it's all Biden's fault that people are feeling so alienated. And but Nikki Haley said something that I agreed with. She said it's time for an accountant in the White House. And having an active CPA license in the state of Illinois, I thought, wow, that makes sense. So I don't think she's an accountant, though, or maybe she is. I actually don't know what the hell.
I don't know what her college education.
So anyway, but the and people perform better. I've heard a lot about the debate, and some things actually came off different to me than what it had been described. I'd heard that Tim Scott completely disappeared. Okay, and this is from listening to the Bulwark podcast, mainly with Charlie Sykes, which I do most days. I listen to the podcast, the previous day's podcast to get on the treadmill in the morning and listen to that while I do my thing. And they said Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina, sort of disappeared. I didn't agree with that. And I thought he did respectably well. I mean, everything considered, given that I wouldn't vote for any of these people. Vivek Ramaswamy, I just don't even, he is a train wreck. And what really is concerning is supposedly he's the new star, and he's the new star and running behind DeSantis. DeSantis, by the way, was, and I apologize, I got to figure out how to stop that binging. I need to do that. But the thing is, if I turned my sound off, I couldn't hear you talk right now.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, it's fine.
I wish people wouldn't email me so much. But anyway, the DeSantis was very much criticized on the podcast for his behavior. I didn't find anything offensive about his demeanor. I mean, he stands there and speaks his mind. I don't agree with a whole lot of it, but he stands there and speaks his mind and looks not crazy, that in the way that Trump and Vivek do. Pence had to cite his religion and all that, and I was kind of off put by Mike Pence. Personally, I don't think he did very well in the debate, and I can really stand to go without hearing politicians talk about religion. Of course, everybody had, although somebody else had there was one person, it appeared, who did not have the American flag. Now, of course, they got to have the American flag on their lapel, and most everyone did, except there was one person, might have been Asa Hutchinson, I'm not sure. It looked like some person had a couple of things on there that were different than the U.S. flag. Let's see, who else was on there? Asa Hutchinson, guy with a Southern accent. He's a former DEA head. Nothing to get terribly excited about there. Chris Christie was reasonably combative, but really, I mean, the people who really got into it, oh my goodness. Nikki Haley got into it with Vivek. Mike Pence got into it with Vivek. And then there was Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota. He did okay, but again, I wouldn't vote for any of these people, and I disagree with them on a serious number of issues. But anyway, but on the issue of abortion came up. Nikki Haley said some things that I thought were pretty rational, and said we need to form a consensus. And she was criticized for that by Mike Pence, who says that's the opposite of leadership. But somebody pointed out, no, leaders form consensus. And she's absolutely right. She says, hey, it's time to be honest here. We don't have the votes for a federal ban on abortion. We don't, America. So we can't go there at this point. And there was talk about how many weeks, whether DeSantis signed a 6-week abortion ban. Pence put out 15 weeks. Pence wants to make it a 15-week abortion ban, which is certainly a hell of a lot more reasonable than a 6-week ban. But she was pretty sensible. But I really think DeSantis, that is going to haunt him in this campaign, is signing a 6-week abortion ban in Florida.
No, give me 1 second. The sun is like blinding me.
Sure. Okay. I'm gonna take a few seconds here myself. So
okay. All right, I'm back. So, by the way, everybody watching, there's a comment section there on your right. Go ahead and click on that if you want to ask any questions, comments, concerns.
Yeah. So, thank you. And and Burgum called for no federal ban on abortion should be handled by the states. But he also signed a 6-week abortion bill in North Dakota.
Wow.
Again, I think that's going to be very rough sledding for anybody seeking the White House, having signed a ban that is strict. Talk about the Department of Education. Here's the thing. And by the way, as a libertarian, I've always said, let's get rid of the Department of Education. I'm all for that. That's an easy call as far as I'm concerned.
That's definitely one department that's a big target. Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is that both Pence and Vivek talked about taking the money. I think they quoted $80 billion. I'm not sure, but I think they said 80 billion. I actually thought it was higher than 80 billion on the Department of Education each year. They're talking about taking that money and block granting it out to the states or to families or something like that. And I think the correct answer is just stop spending the money. We have a huge deficit. Why are we taking this money and spending it in a different way instead of spending it on paying salaries and what have you at the Department of Education? So I thought that was pretty weak. I must say that, and by the way, I actually took notes here. If you can see that, there are notes. I got the notes, and you know what? If I'd taken notes this good in school, I actually would have passed. But in any event, I got to tell you, I hate the concept of a studio audience at the debate. I thought the studio audience, well, it was in an arena. It was in the basketball arena up in where the Milwaukee Bucks play, the Fiserv Center in Milwaukee. And they slowed down at one point. Brent Baer, one of the anchors, turned around and basically told the audience, he didn't say shut up, but he didn't use that phraseology. But he says, this is going to stop up time if you keep doing this, and we're not going to cover all the issues that we could cover if you don't cut out this raucous behavior.
Right.
And I think they ought to have debates without an audience, because
I agree. It's distracting.
It's distracting, but also I think it brings out the worst aspects of candidates. They begin playing to the audience, and saying things that are going to get big cheers. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's at all constructive in the debate. I also thought the hosts, the questioners, Brent Baer and Martha McCallum of Fox, I didn't think they did that great of a job. The thing just kind of got out of control. I think they ought to have a gavel. They ought to give them a gavel and just bang, bang, and call the place to order, because they need something like that. And then, the usual stupid talk about the border and the invasion from the South and the border war. Oh, Tim Scott, he's going to finish that border wall. And it's an invasion. And of course, bringing up fentanyl. Of course, everybody coming across everybody coming across as a drug dealer, and it's just, believe me, they are so far away. They are so far away from ending drug prohibition there in the Republican Party. I mean, that doesn't even come up. They no question about possible legalization of drugs. Or do you think to talk about bemoaning the fentanyl problem? Nobody even asks, do you think maybe the fentanyl problem is worse due to prohibition? The iron law of prohibition, that the tougher you make it, the tighter you make it, that they then are incentivized to make more concentrated drugs because it's less easy to detect. Nothing like that. That's where that debate should have gone, and they total softball, total crap on border and drugs and immigration, and no acknowledgement how difficult and restrictive the immigration laws are. I think the hosts again really laid an egg in that regard. Yeah, Tim Scott's going to finish the border wall, $50 billion or something like that. And then they talked the typical crap about Biden opened the borders. As soon as Biden got in the White House, he opened the borders, which is total bunk. Yeah, we still have a terribly restrictive immigration system. They accuse him of that. And Christie wants to do mass deportation. I mean, whoever is here illegally, I think they tossed out a number 7 million. I mean, I don't.
Oh,
I've heard 11 million. How many are here illegally? Christie says absolutely they've got to go home.
Well, is he going to put them in cattle cars?
They didn't go that far.
Jesus.
So, wow. But I just, how are you going to deport 7 million, or if it's that small? I've heard larger numbers like 11 million. So, but Christie said, nope, they all got to go. And so,
real quick, I would consider that an absolute human rights violation. But aside from that, because I know the Republicans are oftentimes only more concerned about money than anything else. Well, all politicians are. Is what that would do to the economy?
Oh yeah, exactly.
7 million workers. Oof.
Yeah, when they're not all workers, but you're absolutely right.
Right,
I mean,
sure.
And all these people. I mean, last October, I went to a candidate forum when I was the Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate in Illinois, and boy, there was a woman there. Oh, what are you going to do about these immigrants? They're taking our jabs,
right.
And I was not speaking at the time, so I couldn't interrupt her. But that belief is out there. That's for sure, particularly among middle class, blue collar workers, what have you. DeSantis, yes. This nation should be about education, not indoctrination, and talking about basically the culture war, and of course he's passed a lot of restrictive laws instead of letting there be education, real education, freedom. Right. He's passed a bunch of laws saying you can teach that, you can't teach that, blah blah blah, in Florida, and and I do get tired of hearing, all the praise for the United States being the greatest nation, even if it were true. And in so many ways, it's not. No. But even if it were true, why brag about it? I mean, why go around, we're the greatest nation ever, and it's like during their time as dominating the NFL, did the New England Patriots win all those championships because they were strutting around, we're the greatest? No, they were working hard each season by season to win those championships. And I just see no point. It's just blather, talking about, it's pointless to talk about how great this nation is when in so many ways we're hurting, and don't compare all that well to the education achievements of other nations. I mean, yeah, I love the United States. I mean, it's home. Okay. I wouldn't want to live any place else because this is home to me. But I just constantly talking about how great this nation is tiresome. And then I certainly do agree with Tim Scott He talked about that we need to do something in this nation about teachers unions. As a person in favor of education freedom, I agree with that. And I don't know exactly what he can do. Being in the federal government, that's going to be a state and local issue. But I certainly agree with his comments on that. And that's about all. That's about all the comments I've got. On that matter. I did watch the Trump interview with Tucker Carlson on Twitter, and I've got some comments about that whenever you want to get to that. But
yeah, no, we can segue right into that, because that is something I've heard far less about than the debates. And the only thing I remember hearing about as far as the interview is that it was just sort of a lame thing to do as trying to compete for viewership at the same time. Like, I haven't heard anything about the content of the interview. So go ahead.
Well, I can get to that, but again, it's just sort of overall on this debate. I don't know when the next debate is. I think it's scheduled. You know when the next debate is?
I have no clue.
Okay, all right.
Let me look.
I think it's sometime in September.
Let's zoom.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, they're.
I am listening. I'm just going to look it up.
So I don't know where that's going to be, and I presume there's going to be an audience there. It looked like there were several. I don't know how many. It looked like there were several thousand people there. I'll put it that way.
7,000?
Several thousand.
What,
people,
several thousand?
I think. But I don't know. That's how it appeared to me. And but a lot of obviously a lot of a mixture. Okay, it wasn't all Trump, and it wasn't all anti-Trump, but it was there were a lot of boos for Chris Christie, for Mike Pence. Who else? And the hand raising. Okay, the question, you probably heard about the question.
Yes.
If Donald Trump is convicted of felonies, would you vote for him? And the one thing I heard was that DeSantis looked around and then slowly raised his hand. Six said yes. The only no votes on that were Chris Christie and Asa Hutchinson. The other 6 said they would vote for Trump.
Even Pence?
Even Pence. Oh yeah, he said it several times. Yeah. He said he would vote because, and his explanation is he just can't stand the thought of Biden in there for another term.
All right.
So, what was I going to say on that? Oh, but the thing is this: Pence actually, what I saw at the actual video, Pence raised his hand after what's his bucket? DeSantis did. So actually, among the people who raised their hands, it looked to me that the last one to raise his hand was Pence, not DeSantis. And it was a kind of a confusing reaction because at first Chris Christie raised his hand and it looked like he said, and I thought, well, certainly that he didn't mean to do that. And then he began shaking his hand. It was his, to sort of say, no. And his reaction was a bit strange. Then they said, that's kind of confusing there, Governor Christie. Could you tell us, what you're doing? And, he just said that we can't normalize this behavior of Trump, and no, he wouldn't vote for him. So anyway, but I'm trying to think if there was anything else offhand. But
real quick, the next debate is September 27th in Simi Valley, California, at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. So September 27th.
Okay. Well, yeah. Anywho, and also, but they did. Nikki Haley really spoke up about government spending, and how Trump added $8 trillion to the debt. She spoke up and gave him hell and said, yes, it's not just Democrats, it's Republicans who've done this too, and she's absolutely right about that. But they did not. I don't recall anything about budget cuts. They asked about China. What are you going to do about China? But I don't recall any specific questions about budget cuts and definitely entitlements. I don't think entitlements came up really at all as far as a subject. So, but they've got more debates coming, and it'll probably come up in those. So anyway.
All right. Well, very cool. And anything stand out about the interview?
The Trump interview?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I took a lot of notes here. I would just say this, that it struck me as edited. There were a couple of times where, you watch something and it was, there are some shows that are live to tape, so to speak. That is, that it's not on live, but the show is conducted as if it was live. And I, as an example, years ago, back in the 1980s, I worked for NBC in New York, and there were a number of times I was able to go to Late Night with David Letterman shows. All right. And sit in the studio audience. And that show was live to tape. It was just like, it was 1 hour long. It was just like it was live, except they were recording it.
Okay.
But I then, one time in 2008, I happened to go to Stephen Colbert, whatever his show was, maybe it was Stephen Colbert that was on Comedy Central at the time.
The Colbert Show, yeah.
The Colbert Show. And I was very much surprised that was not live to tape. It was, there were times, a couple of times when something happened that they didn't want, and they just stopped the show right there. All right. And then they fixed it, and then they restarted the show. And this looked to me, there were a couple of times I go, this is not live to tape. This has been edited. And so, I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but I don't know. It kind of reminded me of, I actually at times I thought I was watching an episode of Lancelot Link's Secret Chimp.
Wow.
So anyway, you don't want me to start talking like Lancelot Link here, like, oh, David,
Yeah,
here's the letters. Okay, no, I won't do that. But so he had a lot of stuff to say here. He accused the mayor of Moscow's wife. Donald Trump said that the mayor of Moscow's wife gave Joe Biden $3.5 million.
The mayor of Moscow.
Yes, the wife of the mayor of Moscow gave Joe Biden $3.5 million.
For what?
During this interview. That's what I come away with. It was low energy. I've heard other people say this. It was low energy, and it appeared to me that Trump, I think he got tired during the broadcast. I think and at one point later on, I don't think he said DeSantis. He said DeSanctus, I believe, is what I heard.
DeSanctimonious?
Yeah, no, he said DeSanctimonious earlier, but
Okay.
I think he meant to say DeSanctimonious, but he said DeSanctus late in the interview. And I thought, I sort of took that as, I think he's getting tired here.
Yeah.
But it was kind of low energy, and the guy's 77 years old.
Yeah.
I actually came away thinking after the interview that maybe we're starting to see some decline here in the faculties of Donald Trump. That was really a takeaway. I mean, it just kind of struck me that there may be more going on there than just low energy and tiredness. Yeah. Two big bullshitters. I mean, I'll say that, Tucker Carlson and oh my God. I mean, it's just, they're buttering each other up. Oh, Trump says, "Oh, Fox made a big mistake, getting rid of you, Tucker," and they're just buttering each other up. It was just totally gag worthy. Then okay, China pays Biden millions. He accused China of paying Biden millions, and who knows? I mean, who knows what's going to come out in this Hunter Biden stuff? Right. And I just saw something today about emails where Joe Biden used pseudonyms. In
the big one or the big man?
The big guy. The big guy
yeah.
currently used pseudonyms to hide his identity in helping. This was on a National Review email today or something, and somebody has a freedom of information request from the archives or somewhere trying to get to these emails, because the assertion is that Joe Biden helped his son using hiding his identity when he was vice president of the United States. I guess that's my understanding of the high level, high level story. Of course, he called Biden incompetent and corrupt. I think he called him a Manchurian candidate.
Ooh,
I think Biden called him that at one point.
that's a mouthful.
That's where's Frank Sinatra when you need him, is what I say.
Right.
Okay, now here's a claim that he made, and maybe it's true, but he said 35,000 people. He's criticizing handing the Panama Canal over to Panama back when Carter was president. He said 35,000 people died building the Panama Canal from mosquitoes. All right. And let me just check that right now. That he said that, honestly. I mean, I'm just going to Google this right now. How many
of them were, even if that's true, how many of them were Panamanian?
Yeah, we didn't say they were Panamanians. It's 35,000. How many people died building? No, not the Empire State Building. Building the Panama Canal. Let's see what it says. All right. Well, it says over the span of more than 3 decades, at least 25,000 workers died.
Wow.
That's what it says.
Okay.
Working conditions in those days were so horrible it would stagger your imagination. Yeah. So, and 25. Okay. Well, the numbers come in a little. There's 22,000. Malaria, yellow fever. Oh boy, that sounds great. So in any case, all right. Well, maybe 35. He said 35,000. Not. I'd never knew it was that high, but hey, you can. I'm humble enough to admit that at least once I can learn something from Donald Trump.
Oh, absolutely. No, I've never met anybody who everything they say is false.
Yeah. And then they quadruple. Okay, so they gave it to Panama, and then they quadrupled the fee the next day, I guess, for passage. I don't know if that's true. And now he says that China controls the Panama Canal. That's what he said during the thing. Biden can't walk, can't talk.
Also true.
And I think they were talking maybe voter IDs or something. He says IDs are needed to get into the Democratic National Convention, which I can believe. But anyway, but then he attacked mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots are meant to cheat. And then we're talking about no water, showers, dishwashers, sinks. I think he was criticizing the administrative state for water efficiency and energy efficiency guidelines on showers and sinks and dishwashers. But once again, where he really sucks is on trade. It's so ridiculous. He says he was criticizing some washing machines. He says being dumped in the United States. This is why we need tariffs. Apparently the rhinos got together with Democrats to promote free trade, is what I think was what he's saying here. But he was griping about and how he put in tariffs, and then Whirlpool Corporation then benefited from him putting in tariffs, which is probably true. But when he says, think about it for a second. When he says, "Oh, they're dumping washing machines," they're selling washing machines. Okay, that's what they're doing. They're selling washing machines.
A little different there, yeah.
Who want to voluntarily buy them, and this is something that's just horrible in his opinion. DeSantis, I wrote it down. He late in the interview he called him DeSantis, and so anyway, and then how he bailed out Mitch McConnell. This is really rich. McConnell should be good to him because McConnell was going to lose, McConnell was going to lose, and Trump helped McConnell win his last U.S. Senate election in Kentucky. But McConnell's a bad guy now. McConnell's a bad guy. And then January 6th was a beautiful day. Yeah, that was toward the end. That was very near the end of the whole thing. And then, and I guess South America, they're emptying out the prisons and emptying out the prisons and mental institutions in South America so that those people can immigrate to the United States. Oh. And they built 500 miles of wall, and January 6th was beautiful, beautiful day with a lot of love and unity in his estimate. Yeah, that's what he said. So, anywho, it was really something, I must say. It was a tour de force of Donald Trump. But I would agree, low energy and nothing really worth. I watched because of this. I thought, well, you know what? If I'm going to watch the Republican debate, I might as well watch this too. And I think it was about 45 minutes long, the Trump thing.
Well, that's not bad. Okay, so they didn't try to go the extent of the debates.
No. I watched on YouTube the full video, which was 1 hour and 42 minutes, maybe 143. So it was about 103 minutes. And but that's because apparently they had commercials. I didn't know they had commercials when they did it live, but they had maybe 3 commercial breaks during the whole thing, maybe something like that. But though you didn't watch the commercials, they were edited out of what's on YouTube.
Right, gotcha. Well, very cool. Well, thank you for that. That was comprehensive summary for sure. So if you don't mind, I mean, a couple of things you said brought up like a couple issues in my mind. If you don't mind me asking your personal opinion on things, what do you think about voter IDs?
I'm okay with them, frankly. You got to make it easy for people. You got to give people who don't have a driver's license, if necessary, the government should go to them. But I know that I work with a lot of voting rights people, and I think that voter IDs, everywhere you go, you got to show an ID. You got to show an ID to go into an office building. You got to show an ID, to get into the Democratic National Convention. I wouldn't be surprised. I would expect that to be true. So, and I just don't see where many people are being disenfranchised. It's like Biden talking about Georgia, the Georgia voting laws being changed. He said was Jim Crow 2.0. Yet the turnout was very good. My understanding is that people of color who voted generally had good experiences doing it. So I just don't see what the hubbub is about voter ID laws. I think they're okay, and we certainly need to have integrity in our elections. I certainly believe that.
Yeah, no, I'm very close to that. I mean, I generally don't like IDs, and because this is like my extreme anarchism. Like, I don't really feel like I need to tell you or prove to you who I am. But again, like if that's an ideal world where there are no governments. But like I said before, if we're going to have governments, they should do certain things, of which we do, and they should. And so, yeah, I mean, just within the context of that, I don't see what the problem is. I don't see like why it's oppressive in any sort of way, or franchise or disenfranchising people. I don't get that. Like you said, I mean, like even if you don't have like a driver's license or a state ID, which is fine, you don't have to. Some people don't have cars and they like to walk to work, whatever. I don't know. Like as voter ID would be something completely independent of those things. Like it just kind of shows your name and that like you're able to vote. Like I always found it peculiar. Like I go into like a voting place and like, what's your name? David Rich. Oh, okay. Here you go. I'm like, oh, okay. I could be anybody. Just say it and you believe me. So yeah, no, I get you. I don't see what the big deal is, but a lot of this has been politicized anyway. Mm-hmm. Obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there another question?
I guess that was like there was actually a handful of them. Okay, but the voter ID one stood out. Blah 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 blah. No, go ahead. You got something?
Man, I know that. I don't know. What else do you want to talk about here?
Okay, well, I sent you the text a few days ago about how I'd read this book, the 33 questions you're not allowed to ask about United States history or something like that. And the guy actually has a master's degree in philosophy and a PhD in history. There's plenty of things. I forget his name. Let me see if I can get it. I think
Hold on here. There's the text. Okay, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I see it now.
Yeah, and there's plenty of chapters where I think he's full of it, but there's one in particular. Well, did I lose the spot? Okay, hold on. Oh, here it is. And I've read other things about this as well. Was the Wild West really so wild? And let me just read this real quick here.
Sure, go ahead.
This is I think extremely insightful. Recent scholarship has cast serious doubt on this picture of the Old West being solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Okay, in 2004, Stanford University Press published Terry Anderson and P.J. Hill's The Not So Wild, Wild West, which draws a very different lesson from the Western experience. Anderson and Hill show that crime was actually quite low and land and property rights secure in the Old West, despite the lack of government institutions. Even in the unusually challenging conditions that prevailed on the frontier, people devised private mechanisms to allocate rights to land and resources like gold and water, resolve disputes, and enforce the law. The institutions that Westerners established were neither perfect nor immune to abuses, of course, by any criticism we may be inclined to make of them could apply just as strongly to the state-run institutions that later supplanted them. What is abundantly clear from the historical record is that in spite of the absence of formal government, civilizations did not collapse, it thrived. Okay, and there's all sorts of specific data here, and I won't read all of that, but I do. But hold on a second. Okay, so we're both in trouble for having. Why won't you shut up? I don't know what to do. Oh. I just got a new tablet, and it's got its own phone number, and so now this just happened. And I just got it yesterday, so I don't know how to shut it up. Oh, let me go through this in my room.
Okay.
Anyway, that should be fine. I do know that further on in the chapter, he discusses how there was an author who did a research on bank robberies from 1851 to 1900, so 49 years. Right?
If inclusive, if you include 51, and that would be 50 years. Yeah,
okay, so 50. Okay, 50 years.
Yeah,
because he argues, and this is something that rings true to me too. Because I've heard friends like argue from like fictional movies about like things. I'm like, are you kidding? But like most people get their perception of the Old West from movies, and it's just over exaggerated because they want to sell movies. He's like, the actual amount of bank robberies in that 50 years was 9.
No,
9. The death rates were super low. I mean, as awful. I mean, no quantity of this is ever okay, but like rape was extremely low. Like just a homicide was really low. I guess there were like something like 25 homicides in 40 years of like the top 5 cattle cities and stuff like that. And I actually did some math on that. I went out and I looked it up, and I forgot the calculations at work, but I remember the final outcome. Because you wanted things like that, because you're comparing different sized populations to each other from back then to now. I took the tally of the populations of those cities, and the amount of homicides that occurred turned out to be 0.0045% of the population, so just those 5 cities. Okay.
Wow.
All right. And so I compared that to the population of America and the amount of homicides that happen per year over that same amount of time, and it's 4.5% of the population. So the society is literally 1,000 times more dangerous as far as homicides go than it was back in the Old West.
Wow.
Yeah. With far more police and far more government regulation and safety protocols and stuff like that, things have got literally exponentially worse.
Wow.
Just so everybody knows.
Is
that staggering?
It is. I'd heard something like that, but without so much detail back in the sometime in the past, regarding that, the Wild West wasn't as wild as supposedly was the case, so anyway.
Right. And it's one of those things that I like, when I first started like getting into like libertarian philosophy and stuff like that. I mean, one of the adages I would use to tell people why I thought government was completely overrated, and even as far as anarchists goes, like just to get rid of the entire thing, but at least minimize it considerably, is that most people are mostly good most of the time. Right. We just have like the government, the whole notion, coming from like Thomas Hobbes, the notion that like you need a strong federal central government is because people are bad in nature, and they're just going to like go out and hurt each other if they don't have this like suppressive authority over them, which I just do not buy. Some will, but I don't. For the most part, I think most people are decent, good people and want to just kind of live their lives and be left alone, right?
By and large, that's true. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, cool. So, no, I just wanted to bring that up because I think it's an interesting perspective. Again, We get duped so much and like, being shown like, this is the case, that's the case, and it simply is not the case. I remember one of the first like major life lessons I learned early on in college, like learning all this stuff from people in different classes, science classes, math classes, blah, 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 sociology classes, philosophy classes, is that the general public is duped an awful lot. I remember thinking, I'm like, wow, I mean, these people we're all being like told shit that isn't true. And it's just really unfortunate because I don't think it's ever necessary for somebody to go to college to be educated. Education and school are not the same thing. But I think that like one of the famous phrases about democracy is the most dangerous thing for democracy is an uninformed / uneducated public. And somebody said that, I don't remember who it was, but somebody famous. And it's very, very true. Like you go in not knowing what you're talking about. You can vote wrong and you can make bad decisions politically. It's not mere opinion or preference. Agreed?
Right.
Okay.
I hear you. No question that an uneducated populace is going to be bad for the future.
Yes, it really is. It really is. Have you heard anything about there's like around 12 to 15 banks on the verge of like not goodness? Have you heard that?
No, I haven't heard that.
Okay, so I'm not going to get into it much because I was hoping if you had, like maybe we could feel each other in the conversation. I just sort of watched a brief video by an economist about it the other day. I'd like to check my sources. I have not done that yet. He could be completely full of shit. I have no idea, so we'll talk about that another time. But if he's right, it could be bad. Hey, I would like to hear you have an MBA and you're a libertarian. I'd like to hear your perspective on banking in America.
Well, it's a
tiny little subject there.
It's not something I follow that closely.
Oh, okay.
Beyond my, it's interesting. I just bought a book though on Amazon, written by Peter Bernstein. It's going to show up within the next week or so. Bought it used, about banking and gold and what have you. But I never worked in the banking industry, and I haven't really thought about it all that much since I took a money and banking class at the University of Chicago over 40 years ago.
Let's see, that sounds like it would be just a fascinating class.
It was, but I don't remember all that much.
No, I know that was a while. It was the early 80s or something.
As far as the condition of the banks in this nation right now, I mean, obviously there was some trouble at what was it, Republic Bank and First Republic, and there was another bank, a couple of SVB Bank, I want to say, Silicon Valley. So there were a couple of banks that basically, I guess, didn't match their assets up with their liabilities, so to speak, and that can cause problems when if your assets are fixed rate loans that go down in value when interest rates go up, and people realize that perhaps your liabilities, the bank's liabilities, exceed their assets, then that can create a bank run, and people can go and get their cash out, and then the bank collapses because of the liabilities being worth more than the assets. But I certainly would not hold myself out to be a banking industry expert by any means.
Well, I know that was one of the things, again, this guy said in the video, and it does just makes sort of intuitive sense. So I don't know the numbers or the complexities of this, but just, with the Federal Reserve, raising interest rates, which is what reduces loans. I mean, people stop getting loans, and that's the whole point for some reason.
Oh,
right. Well, yeah. But then the banks suffer because they're not making any money off the interest of loans.
I don't know. I think banks do pretty well when interest rates go up, generally, but I will say that I can just say there's a house across the street from us that is sitting there. It went on the market in early July, and it's been 7.5 weeks so far, and when this market was hot, 2 to 3, the real estate market was hot 2 to 3 years ago, houses went on, then they went fast. And before that, in this neighborhood before that, they went slowly. The house that Julie and I bought was on the market for, I think, a year or so, close to, if it wasn't a full year, it was close to a full year. It was on the market, and there was about a 20% price reduction. And now I see a house across the street, now we have 30-year mortgage rates over 7%. And I don't see a lot of people going through that house right now. And they had one open house one day back in July, and I don't see any more open houses, and I don't see much traffic going through that house right now. So the real estate market could be hurting right now due to the high interest rates, relatively high anyway.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, to going back again to banks, so like centralized banking, and I'm no fan of centralization and just about everything. But like the Federal Reserve, I think, is just a horrific organization. I understand it's massively regulated. It's private, but it's massively regulated. I get that, and that's okay. But they sell us $1 for like 90, for like 4 or 5 cents or something like that. So like automatically the dollar is worth less than 100 cents when it's given to the government or the banks to distribute. That's weird.
Well, there's seigniorage. I think that's how it's pronounced. That whereby I think that comes about because the cost to produce $1. They produce $1. There's $1, but it costs far less to create that than $1. Although I've heard that it costs more than a penny to make a penny. Is what I've heard.
But I've heard that too.
Yeah. So anyway, but
which is weird.
Yeah, but I as far as the Federal Reserve goes, a lot of libertarians want to do away with the Federal Reserve. Again, this is a highly technical area. And that would probably work. But the thing is, when a lot of libertarians say end the Fed, they need to articulate what is going to replace the Federal Reserve. I mean, it could get worse. I mean, and I don't think, with all due respect again to libertarian enthusiasts who want to end the Fed, I don't think ending the Federal Reserve is a salient issue with the American people. I think inflation is. I think inflation is inflation is definitely. In fact, they had some man on the street interviews in Milwaukee of people that they played at the beginning of the debate or sometime during the debate talking about inflation. And boy, that they were talking about, these people, was the price of groceries is ridiculous, and the price of this and that, and Biden needs to work like crazy. And I don't recall hearing the latest CPI number. Hold on, I just want to Google August CPI report. Hang on, just. Because certainly it would be out by now, release. And what was it? August 10, the index. What is it here? Okay, so it rose 0.2%. This came out August 10, so it was for July. And it seems like the 12 month. Okay, so over the last 12 months, it says the all items index increased 3.2%. So I think that that right now, I think the stock market, I think people are hoping and thinking that maybe the Fed is done raising interest rates, but they're we're going to have to see what the August report is. It'll probably on or about September 10th. They'll come out with the August numbers, I think, and we'll see, where inflation stands. I certainly hope that the news is such where the Federal Reserve doesn't feel they have to raise interest rates, to further tame inflation. And I think right now, both yesterday and today were very good days in the stock market. And I just kind of wonder if people are beginning to think, okay, they're done raising interest rates for now. And that would be a big worry in the stock market for sure.
That's interesting. We should have like at least one entire show dedicated to economics, because I'm like, there's things you've been saying that like I've read stuff about, and I did study some economics in school and stuff like that. Nothing major, but besides different schools of like economic thought, like capitalism and Marxism and socialism and all the variations, stuff like that. I mean, notions of like the money surplus in the economy is like one of the things that causes inflation, and that comes from like this equation in economics: MV equals PY, which is money times velocity equals price times yield. I'm sure you've heard this before.
Oh yeah, it's ringing some bells from decades.
Yeah. And like, but there's that's actually turns out to be very controversial. Like a lot of economists are like, no, that's not the right interpretation of that equation. Money surplus has little to nothing to do with inflation. It has to do. I mean, there's literally one direct cause of inflation. There's only one.
Mhm.
People raise prices. That's it. Why they raise prices is a whole set of things.
Well, I no that I think that's a symptom. It's not a cause. I mean, I think that ultimately, Milton Friedman said inflation is always a monetary phenomenon, and I think he's right about that. And I think that inflation is generally brought about by overly profligate monetary policy, but fiscal policy matters too. I mean, the Federal Reserve, as long as Congress is spendthrift, it's going to be tough for the Federal Reserve to bring down inflation.
And people think that that's even controversial. Like it's merely correlational between like them raising interest rates and inflation going down. It hasn't always been the case. There's all sorts of like undetermined, unpredictable amount of time between them raising interest rates and inflation going down. So how could you possibly get a precise scientific measure of that being the reason why inflation went down when there's 8 billion other things going on in the economy?
But I don't think it's precise. But and again, we're getting into an area here. but generally, I think that it's loose monetary policy. I think that interest rates were held too low for too long, but I certainly took advantage of that. I mean, refining the house back in September 2020 was a great move. I mean, it was because those interest rates ain't going back to 3% anytime soon.
Right.
But in any event, but I think that there has to be restraint at the Federal Reserve in terms of money supply growth, and it's interesting. There was a Wall Street Journal column on predicted inflation back a couple years ago, where a guy by the name of Steve Hanke, who's at Johns Hopkins, and somebody else, I forget the other guy's name, but they were looking at the money supply figures, and they were quite alarmed by high growth in the money supply. And they predicted about a year from now, we think we're going to see 8 to 9% inflation. And sure enough, a year later, it was 8 to 9% inflation. But then they had a column a few months ago where they said that they thought inflation would be back down to the 2 to 3% range in a year. And I think that's what they said, but it was definitely that given the money supply situation, that they thought that inflation was going to be greatly reduced a year into the future. And I don't think a year has passed, but so far it looks as if that prediction as well is coming true.
So if again, we're almost done. We need to have this is fabulous. We need to have another show just on economics. Because I think that's probably an area we're not going to agree fully on. And maybe it's about time we don't agree because we've agreed about everything. So,
that's right.
At the end of the day, we are involved in competing parties, but go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, we need some disagreement on this show.
Exactly. Let's heat this up a little bit. But I forgot what I was going to say. Anyway, so that's okay because we need to talk about this some other time. This is we got a minute left. So, yeah. Well, thanks, Bill, for coming back on. I know you're a busy guy and everything else, and I appreciate it. I'm having a great time with this show. And maybe next week we can talk about economics if nothing exciting happens in the interim.
Okay.
That would be very, very cool. I'll do a little bit of my research. You can do your research. We'll come at it, with kid gloves. You're still my friend, and I will always choose friendship over policy. Okay, so
I agree with that.
Okay, 100%. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to Perspectives, third-party discussion, talk show. Till next time, take care.
So long.
All right, hold on a second.